Aloha, everyone. Welcome to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle sponsored every Saturday at Still and Moving Center online so that we can get folks from all over the place. And we managed to scoop Anna Morales in, our speaker for today, as she is returning from Italy and passing through her hometown in Pennsylvania and on her way to her new home. And Anna is somebody very beloved of Still and Moving Center, who first started coming for our satsangs. And I was so taken by the mind, heart, and soul of this young woman that I just kept asking her until she finally agreed to work for us at Still and Moving. And she did a wonderful stint with us, having an administrative role that she fulfilled beautifully. And also, she's a yoga teacher. Meanwhile, she has had and has cultivated a beautiful love for the arts, and in particular for photography. This is a book that she published while she was still in college of her photography. And she has a photographic company that really seeks to pull out visions of love that she finds in the world, and particularly, for example, people who are getting engaged or getting married, or families with little children, all kinds of images of love she brings up very beautifully. So with today's theme of passion to compassion, we're very pleased to have Anna be our opening speaker who will get us started with our conversation today. Anna?
Thank you for the sweet introduction, Renee. And thanks everyone for coming. It's so good to see all of you. As Renee mentioned, I've been traveling a lot. I got back from Italy last night, and so I'm a little bit tired and not feeling as sharp in my mind. So I definitely I'll do my best, but want to encourage everyone to share their own perspectives on this topic and just have a good conversation together. I'm going to share my screen and talk about passion to compassion from the yogic perspective today. Just let me know if you cannot see my screen and if you cannot hear me at any point. Can everyone see this?
Good to go.
Thank you. So here we have a picture of a lotus flower with a little bee going into the middle in Indonesia. I'm talking on passion to compassion. So for me, I am someone who really likes definitions and kind of breaking down meanings of words. So it's always helpful to think about what compassion means. And I did a little bit of research from the yogic perspective on compassion and combine that with what I already know or have learned and put together a few points of what I think is important to think about when we talk about compassion. Um, I believe compassion is a deep awareness of suffering, both of one's own and others, coupled with a desire to alleviate that suffering. It's the ability to feel the pain of others in your own heart, but it's also related to empathy, which is the ability to understand and share the feelings with another person, good and bad. So if we were to break it down in a simple way, the way that these two terms are related, empathy can be seen as the understanding of emotions for other people, while compassion can be the action that we take once we feel that empathy towards others. Since I'm speaking from the yogic tradition, I found this term, karuna, which I did not know of before today, or before presenting to you all today. Kara means to do or to make, and so it's really kind of more of the action behind compassion from the yogic and Hinduism or perspective of Hinduism. It's said to be one of the nine basic rasas or emotions in this tradition. And this quality encourages people to rid themselves of their more self centered forms of pity, as well as the influence of their ego, in order to attain higher levels of compassion that is embodied by karuna. This term is brought up in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. In this sutra, which I'm going to try my best to pronounce and translate, Sutra 133, Maitri Karuna Mudi Tope Kasanam Sukha Dukkha Punya Apunya Visayanam Bhavanta Chitta Paradasanam Prasadanam. This translates to by cultivating attitudes of friendliness, which is Maitri, towards the happy, compassion, Karuna, for those who are suffering, joy, mudita, for the virtuous, and equanimity, upeksha, towards the non virtuous, one can attain peace and tranquility of the mind. So that's kind of a formula that Patanjali puts together in the Yoga Sutras for us to cultivate karuna, as well as happiness and equanimity and a more peaceful state of mind. Another word that came to mind when thinking about compassion from the yogic tradition is ahimsa, which is the first yama, and yama is a like a moral discipline or attitude towards the world. It's translated to non-harming. It's the first yama in the yogic path, which is 8 limbs. And it's not just non-harming in the way that it's our actions, but it's also non-harming in thoughts and our words, knowing that that creates action and directly affects all of the beings around us. So, a few ways that I think are pretty simple that we can all practice daily compassion, including some things that I feel like I could work on myself. Active listening, I feel like this is definitely a challenge. I think maybe personally for me in my attention span, being able to sit down and truly just listen to someone who is in need of sharing their feelings, their thoughts. I think that that can be almost therapeutic, just sitting and being and like taking in something, even if it's not something that you necessarily agree with. Having that space within your mind, your heart, to carry that person, I think is one of the most amazing forms of compassion that I've experienced. Self-compassion comes first. Of course, we have to be able to feel these emotions, the sense of being in ourselves, in order to see that and have the empathy in others. So, being able to treat ourselves to moments of joy, doing what you love, and giving yourself some grace, some mercy, which is also another translation of karuna is mercy. There's a something called metta meditation, which is actually from the Buddhist tradition, I believe. And I haven't practiced it too much, but from the few times that I have, it's a practice where you are embodying compassion for yourself, and sharing that to others around you, near and far. So sometimes you can start within yourself and go towards maybe someone in your family, and then outwards towards further boundaries. Sometimes including people who you may not feel like compassion comes really easily to them, or you might feel like it's harder to be compassionate towards them. So that's a really great way to challenge your compassion is the metta meditation. You can look that up. I believe that there are lots of free ones on YouTube and other resources. There's also forgiveness, which I think is so underestimated. Being able to look beyond maybe something that's holding you back, a grudge, or anger or ego, and just letting go and forgiving someone is a great act of compassion. And there's also acts of kindness. So it can be something as big as letting someone into your home, having someone for dinner who might need some support, or maybe just even sharing a smile or a greeting while you're driving, while you're on the street. I think we need more of that, especially driving, and just little acts of kindness. And also just acknowledging interconnectedness, which is a really big term for me in my yogic practice, is recognizing that everything that we do, we think, we say, we do, affects everything in the whole world, all of the beings, in one way or another. And when we can recognize our interconnectedness, then we can definitely act with more compassion, knowing that if we're treating ourselves with compassion, we're treating others with compassion, and vice versa. Those are just a few small ways to practice compassion in your life. And so today's topic, or this week's topic, is passion to compassion. So I definitely wanted to talk about passion. And I like to believe that you don't necessarily need to practice compassion out of a place of pity, of looking down on someone, but you can use your own passions to connect with people and find that compassion towards them. And so for me, my passions are photography, being in the ocean, different forms of art like painting, ceramics lately, doing some inversions, and just seeing families and people from all around the world. Um, and my practice has been tuning into those different avenues that fuel my fire, that make me feel passionate about the world, about other people. Um, the reason I was drawn to this topic actually is because the photography company that Renee mentioned, my slogan that I chose is creative and compassionate communication, because I felt like having that compassion is so important behind the lens, being able to feel what other people are feeling, step into their shoes, and try to share their story through photos is a big responsibility. But I think it's also a really fun way to uplift people, and also to share stories of people from different parts of the world who might otherwise not really have a ability to feel that interconnectedness. So that is just a few things that fuel my passion. And I do want to open it up and just share, if you're open to unmuting, one thing or two that fuels your sense of connectedness, that makes you feel compassionate and interconnected towards the people around you. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and invite you all to close your eyes for a moment. Think about maybe an instance recently where you felt super connected to someone near or far.
I can start.
Okay.
So thank you so much for that intro to everything. It was very good to see all the concepts and things in detail. It's always amazing to me. I know Doris said this a lot, but how aligned these topics in the almanac are with our life and what's happening in the world. Earlier today, I'm in California. We have a community garden event here in my neighborhood in California, and Kai made a big meal for everyone, and we invite the community to come, and it's all free. We cook like all this much food for all the neighbors, like homeless, to come over. And this was my first time participating in the event. I actually never done something like that. And I just was so full with joy, but I also felt so much compassion towards everybody that came, that is not able to have access to a meal like that for free, that live around. And I think it was the first time in my life, in my heart, out of nowhere, just doing this act, I just felt this deep sense of compassion, this feeling for these people, and understanding and wanting to do something about it. Not only smile, but like give them and share the kindness and then see how their eyes light up. So that was very in alignment with this topic today. And it was a beautiful thing. I think at some point I just get very excited, very passionate when I have these lights of insight. I'm like, I think I was born to help people in the community and do things for other, because the joy that it brought me, it was insane. It was magical. I was just like a BCB trying to like touch everyone and help, and it was incredible. And I could have never felt that if I wasn't there, trying to help and see it and kind of understand, like, from my perspective where I am, like my house, what I do, all my blessings. I'm like, wow, these people really need this, and kind of step into their shoes and do their best to help. So that was very nice. And thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
That's so sweet. And I feel like that's a perfect example because he's such a good chef, and that's the best love language is like food from Kai. It's always so good and nurturing. And it's something he's so passionate about too, where he has like dedicated so much of his life so far to learning about and working in nutrition and doing his work in being a dietitian. Is he a dietitian? Is that
Yeah.
his registered dietitian? Yeah, I feel like that's a perfect example of like putting so much of his passion into connecting the community and sharing his talents. That's so sweet.
Definitely a huge act of kindness on both of your parts.
Does anyone else have an example or an instance that comes to mind?
Of connectedness or compassion or
Yeah, or something that fuels like yours, like for maybe for Kai it's cooking, for me is photography, maybe Judy?
see, Judy, we need you to unmute. We can't hear you yet.
Yeah, sorry.
Sure.
Our religion in Buddhism has the idea of discriminating compassion. In other words, you want to help an alcoholic, but you don't give him a bottle of wine, which is what he wants. You give him help, which might be difficult. But there are a lot of people who are do-gooders and they want to do something, but they don't know any skills as how to do it. I remember once on a ship, we were headed for Puerto Rico, and a woman at the table said, I'm going into the poorest section of Puerto Rico. I'm not going to stay in the tourist section. And I guess I'm a little bit worldly wise for my travels. I said, you could get robbed. And then everybody at the table just jumped on me for being negative. And I said, well, are you a doctor, a nurse, a social worker? Or what will you do for these people? Except stand there as a rich tourist. And they're very poor. Well, that's what I mean. If she had some skill, and it turned out I saw a man collecting money from the Catholic Church that I know that although I don't agree with their doctrines, they do help the poor. I pulled $10 out of my jeans and put it in the basket because I know that they have doctors and nurses and counselors and people who will help these people. So I think discrimination with compassion is absolutely vital. What do you think?
That is super interesting that you bring up this way of calling it discrimination, like being able to discern what the right act of kindness is for a certain person or group of people. I think is a really big challenge, especially for me, being able to really tune in and think about how I can offer my gifts and give what is needed is a really good practice. Thank you for sharing.
I think that the Buddhists talk a lot about the need for a balance between wisdom and compassion, so that
Exactly.
one can deliver that compassion in a way that's actually helpful, so that it isn't just coming from the heart, that there is this influence from the discriminating mind that helps to direct it in a
Yes,
way.
exactly. I mean, for example, Albert Schweitzer was a very learned Christian. He had a doctor of theology, a doctor of philosophy, and a doctor of music, but he went to medical school before he went to the Congo to really help these people. But they needed medical care before they needed to be preached at or anything else. So at the age of 40, he went to medical school. Just amazing what he did. And of course, he became a very famous man, a Nobel laureate. But he didn't do it for that fame or those honors.
Diana, you need to unmute if you would.
For me, the biggest form of compassion is actually active listening. That when we really listen to people, they feel seen and heard. And I don't care if it's the grocery person, how are you? And be really interested in how are you instead of I'm just fine. And to really listen to what they need and want, then we can actively give compassion in a way. But I think one of the greatest gifts that we can do is make people feel visible and seen and heard, and that what they're saying matters. So it's not necessarily giving money. For me, money helps, but it's really being able to be present with people 100% and feel that we're holding a place of love and oneness, and not better than, not anything like that, but just being present with somebody 100% to me is one of the greatest forms of compassion that I have found in my life.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And so needed too. I think having moments of connection with people where it's not just walking through the motions of what's expected socially, but really tuning into like asking what you truly want to know and listening to that response, I think is so, so powerful and connecting, and goes back to that interconnectedness that I feel is so strong. Thanks for sharing, Diana. What else fuels all of your passion? Yeah, Jade or Dishan?
Thank you all so much for sharing. And Anna, and Sharoni, I also love how you started off with using your passion to share compassion and connectedness. I think that's so beautifully spoken. I think one of our passions is wellness and just helping people to cultivate their wellness, their connection to self and nature. And I think for us, that is one of the ways that we use passion to share compassion, and rooted in both the yoga and the qigong philosophy. And I remember on a number of this one occasion where there was a young lady that was visiting Oahu, and she was also a photographer. And I just invited her, and I just felt something that, oh, I'm just gonna invite her to I kind of feel that uh she may experience something through this practice. And I just got an inclination to invite her. So I invited her to do Qigong with us. And we were flowing through Qigong, and during the session, at the end, she just felt like a release of energy. And she just started crying happy tears. And she just felt so seen, as if She was supposed to be there at that time, at that day, in that moment, to hear what was needed for her purpose in that season. And and we just all hugged her and shared that compassion with her. And when things like this happen, and I see people are able to connect and release, just kind of like release a burden, and just feel seen, feel connected to you and the people around you, then you can just feel loved. And I think that's the power of compassion, when you can share your love and your kindness with others so that they can see their own light.
Yeah, what a beautiful story. I think also when you're able to fine tune your gifts, like you two have with Qigong, like it's incredible the people that you attract at just the right moment that need exactly that practice. And it's amazing how you can also tune into who you can invite and who you can open up that practice to. That's beautiful. Yeah, Dishan?
I think I'll share one small story from this morning. And it's funny that I use this difference between compassion and attachment. And this morning we were paddling out in the ocean, and we were graced by the birds flying in the ocean. And they reminded us about the sayings of do you want to hold the bird because you love their song, or do you want to create an open space or sky for them to fly? And there's a big difference in you want to serve something because you want to give that, as opposed to this is what you need and this is what I'm going to give you. And the journey from passion to compassion, in a way, it's how do we remove our layer of attachment, our layer of identity in a way. And that allows us to see from their lens, or in a way that can help them go in the journey where they want to go. And the word compassion come is, I think in Latin, it's called as together. So how do we create the togetherness and in passion that can flow you?
Dishan, would you mind reading our quote for the week from the Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama? I think it's very connected with what you're saying.
It is important not to confuse attachment with compassion. A compassionate thought is motivated by a wish to help release beings from their misery. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as an individual, one of my thought that I'm very hyper focused and aware about is how do I remove my layer of identity in every conversation, so that I'm not being a blocker, rather I'm a vehicle for that energy to flow through for that person. That's a deeper compassion thought that I try my level best to execute from being as a husband, or being as a partner, or even being as different identities and roles that we play in our life every single day.
Very helpful. Sharani.
I was just gonna say that's so beautiful. Yeah, I feel like we need the drive to that compassion, and that's what passion is. Passion is the drive. Compassion is the connect. Everything is connected. Everything is together, right? If we don't have that drive, if we don't have that, that self desire to like go towards something, right? How we're gonna accomplish that whole. So I I love that idea of using that drive to then let go of it and connect it all. Very beautiful said, Dishin. I love it.
I have a feeling we may hear from Bob along the lines that I'm going to bring up, which is that if we look at the etymology of the word passion, we come to a word that means suffering, and hence we have Christ on the cross. We talk about the passion of Christ, and there is a Sanskrit word for desire, and often that is seen as on a personal level, to the extent to which we are controlled by desire, we are actually blocked from compassion because we're so much wanting something for ourselves that it creates that layer of identity that Duchenne is talking about wanting to remove to as much of an extent as he can in his conversations, so that his desires, his personality, his wants and needs, and so on, wouldn't get in the way of this kind of pure listening, for example, that Anna brought up as one of the ways of being very compassionate. And I think also that there's a sense in which, to the extent that we are controlled by our desires, we don't have that same freedom to choose as if we are able to let go of those personal desires. And so then we're kind of confined by those desires, and this is what I want, and if I don't get it, everything's going to be wrong, and maybe I'm going to just do something to get it for myself. That can lead to a lot of suffering. That kind of compassion, that kind of passion, that kind of desire-driven passion that has to do with the ego. So it's really interesting that in modern day parlance, we talk about passion as a virtue that can drive us towards compassion. So it's really interesting what happens, I think, in words and how they're used in different ways. So, Bob, do you want to talk about this from a Buddhist perspective?
Well, you've all been doing such a wonderful job of doing that. I think the last category of interconnectedness is sort of the heart of Buddhism. But I think it's interesting to know that as you were talking about desire, there is a sense of wisdom and discrimination behind that view. As Jade was talking about, a sense of wellness or well-being. If the Buddhist would say, well, we want to have desires, we want to have feelings, but we also want them to come forth in a kind of natural way, in a right way, right view, action, and things of that sort. So it's interesting. One of the uses of suffering is Jesus saying, suffer the children to come unto me. Let them come. So how do you just let your feelings happen? When Dishan was talking about the birds, one of the paths of Tao that we want to follow is the path of the bird, which leaves no trace and has no really directionality except to move in air, to go forward, but forward being the direction that it's going. It can turn and then a new forward happens. So I'm kind of thinking all of those things relate to that sense of almost imagination or empathy or understanding, somehow getting to a sense where we have a connectedness. In Buddhism, we talk about the net of Indra. We don't want to understand ourselves in isolation. our individual selves, but we want to understand ourselves as connected intimately to all other beings, and not just connected, but connected in such a way that we are not separate from them. So that when you are feeding hungry people, you are feeding yourself in a fundamental way. You're allowing the feelings to not be dualistic or separateness or I feed you, I see it. Um, that objectification of the world, but somehow there's a verb happening. I am being a certain kind of way. And that's what I see the heart of it really being. It's kind of an amazing intimate. Um, well, I forget the first speaker was talking about Albert Schweitzer, and I agree that as a doctor he was able to help. But for me, the most amazing thing he did was out of his whole experience in describing it, he said, what is most important is a reverence for life. That was the name of his book. He wrote about his experiences, A Reverence for Life. And a reverence for life means that you're not just walking in the woods, but you are alive and movement and things are with you. And being alive and living and life are not all separate things. That's all together. And in that sense, it's connectedness in a very beautiful sense. And I was just struck that that thought is really what all of you have been saying in different ways. So it strikes me as not just a Buddhist way of thinking, but maybe a sense of true well-being, as Jade was talking about.
Beautiful. Thank you. Judy?
Uh, yeah, well, if you called on me, I do have in the Jewish way of thinking, there's the great philosopher Martin Buber, who wrote a book years ago called Should Do, I and Thou. And he said there are two ways of seeing people in the world. You can see them as it's, like the lady in the bag, the person at the supermarket you do business with, and you can see people very personally in their roles or judge them by their race, their ethnicity, nationality, etc. Or you can see people as thous, who the person really is, and you could really listen. Now, this doesn't mean that you get totally chummy with everybody you meet, but there's communication that I experience we all have in our life. I remember trying to talk with a graduate advisor at UC Santa Barbara, and all he did is pull out my graduate record and start looking at my grades and my grade point average and then making judgments in regard to that and not looking at me, not talking to me at all. And that was just the worst kind of it communication. And I think we've all experienced that in a number of different aspects of life. Even in personal relationships, one can even do that to a husband or a wife or a close relationship to the other person, and just look at them as a record or judge them in some way that's very critical all the time. So I wonder what people think of that, because that is really the opposite of compassion, whereas seeing another person as a thou, as a human being, is real compassion, I
You
think.
seem to be, taking us back to one of Anna's original points about connectedness, and that it is so disconnected. The I, thou, with this respect and reverence, such as Albert Schweitzer has in that beautiful, beautiful phrase, reverence for life. Um, that tends towards that warmth of connectedness that allows us to have this overflowing of compassion that Shirley got to experience this morning with so much joy. And I'm sure you did not feel separate from these people at all. I mean, you felt as if you would want to give to them as much as if you'd known them for a decade, or right?
Gave
Yeah.
up a lot. It cost him
I
his
actually
voice and his
go for
organ. He couldn't play there in the Congo. You know, he just could practice a keyboard, but he couldn't bring an organ there. And he was a master organist. And his wife left; she couldn't handle it there. So
Mm-hmm.
he gave up a lot to help people he didn't even know at
Uh-huh.
all.
Right, right. He felt very, very connected with the people that he had landed amongst. Yeah. Shirane?
I was gonna say that like I am hearing a lot of like how compassion it's, like you're like Dishin said, not exactly like this, but he says something of like we're trying to detach yourself from that like through compassion, but then I'm just ask myself is like if true selflessness always like if it doesn't come from caring, like if true selflessness comes from caring, like how is our true self not there? Like I don't know how to put it together, but like I feel it's like really deep, but like does true selflessness always come from caring? And if he does, is that truly like selflessness or not?
Yeah, I think there's a
Go
distinction
for it,
between the
Diane.
personal self and the greater self, at which level we can connect with everyone. But when we're into our little tiny shrunken personal self with everything that I want and I need and I think, that forms more barriers than connectedness. So, yeah, it depends which self you're talking about, I think, or which level of ourselves. Diana had the
The
best
one
thing
that
to
cares, the one that
Right,
cares, the one that experiences compassion.
right.
And I think compassion has to start with ourselves. There's an example I give that when your heart is empty, you give out of need. You want to be loved, you want to be liked, you want to be whatever. When your heart is filled and you're giving out of love, you're giving out of an abundance of love and faith. And it's not just that I need to receive something back. So in our lives, when we're feeling that what I call is we're trying to take care of everyone else besides ourselves. But if we take care of ourselves with compassion and love, then we can come from a place of fullness and love and give to others from a clear place, like Deshaun was saying, instead of feeling like we're giving from ego, we're giving from an abundance of love.
It's interesting psychologically, Abraham Maslow talked about needs, and there are needs that we have. In other words, we have a need for food, a need for shelter, a need for clothing, a need for attention, care, but those are all having needs. In other words, needs that relate to things out there. And then he talked about somehow when those are more or less satisfied, we can move into what he called being needs, or more a sense of rather than wanting things, we experience a sense of being, a well being. And that is when he thought we could reach things like self actualization, so that you can have an I thou experience that doesn't objectify someone else. So we have these needs, and there are our self, but once we can satisfy those, we can then move into a deeper sense of well being. And that allows for connection in a much different way. And until you have those, if you're wondering where your next meal is coming from, you may not be able to care as much about other people until you sort of respond to those needs. So he had what he called a hierarchy of needs. And the highest needs were those that really um, were beyond wanting things, but being in a certain kind of way.
Sorry, this topic is like very ooh. So, I remember when Anna was presenting, she was saying like little acts of kindness, are shows of compassion. So I was wondering if like compassion loses its power if it doesn't lead to action, right? Like it's not enough to have the feeling, right? The concept of compassion is to feel deeply for somebody to suffer with, but if it doesn't lead to action, to doing that, an altruistic action for that person, does it keep his power? Does it lose it? Like wondering what are the ideas on that.
Yeah, I think that compassion is all about action. That's something that I feel like changed for me by doing this presentation, is kind of learning that, because I think that I was thinking about empathy, sympathy, and compassion and how they're maybe different and the same. And it seems like sympathy is being able to feel maybe for someone, empathy is feeling with someone, and then compassion is like turning that feeling with someone into acting from a place of understanding that feeling and really drawing on that action. And but I think that the action doesn't always need to be so big and just like a giant act that maybe is very obvious. I think it can be your thoughts even, or a word or a smile. Something really subtle can be that action too. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that compassion is about action. And that's also something that I'm trying to work on myself, is that I sometimes do feel the sense of empathy, but I don't know exactly where to act from that. And so that's kind of why I wanted to just bring together the small daily ones, because sometimes that's all that I can think to do or manage to do. But I, of course, want to strive to do better, bigger acts. It's just sometimes confusing knowing where to put your energy towards. There's so much out there to be compassionate towards, but that's a really good distinction, Sharone.
Yeah, just wondering what the world altruist fits in it all. As a kid, I was just very fascinated about that, and I remember having the conversations with my brother about it. So I don't know, talking about compassion just make me think about altruism. And I know I'm taking it a little bit away from it, but I feel they're very interconnected. So maybe Bob, if you have an idea, audition, would love to hear your deep
It's,
perspective on it, because yeah, I feel like I'm very conceptual, so compassion is always being more like a feeling for me, and then altruism is the action I take towards something that I feel compassion.
yeah, I think it's very important to recognize that, if we look at it as karma, karma comes from our words, our feelings, and our actions. And so they're all real. And that's always important. In Buddhism, one of the points, and I think it's a very subtle one, and it's something that's related to what you're saying. When you take an action, um, in Buddhism, we say, take the action, but don't worry about the consequence. In other words, if I have a heart and I'm recycling, if I think about, well, will this really make the world more balanced? Probably not. It's a small, almost useless activity, but because it's my way of interacting in the world, I shouldn't worry about the consequence. I should just do it. And worrying about the consequences means that you somehow feel you can control that this is a good action. You can give someone money. I think this is the first speaker who sort of mentioned this. If they're an alcoholic, giving them money means they'll probably use it poorly, but you don't control that. Somehow, giving out of the generosity of your heart is a trusting activity that, you know, there are different ways of giving, and sometimes you can think it through, and sometimes you really can't. And no matter what it is, you really don't have control over how it's going to affect the rest of the world. So I think that's a I don't know, it's a way of thinking about action that maybe takes away some of the self-centeredness of it. Um, I don't know, it was related to kind of what I think you're saying, and then you still have to act, but you don't worry so much about whether it's going to save the world or how it's going to be taken.
I think in the definition that Anna gave to us for compassion, there is a deep feeling of connection to care about the suffering of others and a desire to alleviate it. And just the mere fact of having that desire of wanting to help, wanting to somehow be of service, to wipe the tear from that person's eye, that in itself constitutes compassion. And if we have the opportunity and we have the wisdom to see how we might do something to alleviate their suffering, oh, that's all the better. Then we get to do that altruistic action, right? But just the wanting to do it, longing in your heart, looking for any opportunity that you can to be of service to relieve that suffering, I think that in itself constitutes compassion. And it's going to wait there, you know? If it's real, it's going to wait there until it has the chance to, you know, be born into an actual word or deed or just that listening ear.
I
We
may
haven't heard
jump
from
in. Mary, would you share? Because I love your sharing. Would you be willing to share on this topic?
Well, thank you, Anna. It's and everybody's sharing. It really is heartwarming. The things that came to my mind is that we are all given gifts, and we may not know them until we're older. Some people, they understand their gifts when they're young, and some people don't realize it until they're older. But our gifts are given to us to share. They're not for us to hold on to and um, not let anybody in. They're for us to share. And I think that our gifts are also our passion. Because when you find a gift that really, really tugs at your heart, and that's a passion, and you share that passion, you don't just keep it under, you don't keep it to yourself. You want others to know it. And the other thing that I was thinking of is about love, and love is wanting the best for the other. When Bob was talking about donations and giving money to people, I was taught you can't take it back. Once you give something, you don't take it back. You don't say, well, I'll give it to you if you're going to use it for good. You don't do that. Once you give it, it's out of your hands. It's not your burden anymore. It's the other person's. What they do with it is their business. Amen.
I think we have time for everybody to give a very brief takeaway before we close. And so I would like to ask Deshen and Jade, and then Carolyn, Diana. This is the way you appear on my screen. Carolyn, then Diana, then Bob, Mary, Sharone, and Judy, and we'll close with Anna.
I think I'll go first. So I think it's also an answer to Sharone's question about how to action versus compassion. And one of the new learnings that I've been trying to adopt, and which ties to this passion to compassion, is actively participating in the world while being self-aware about your emotions. And there's a very fine line. There's many times there's a silent judgment in yourself when if you can find yourself in that situation, just try to either step back or you step forward, depending on where your feeling is. And that's an act of self-compassion, which is also going out to the world. I think that's where my takeaway is to be a focus on that piece of energy that can help heal, shift, and transform a bit.
Thank you.
Then you can come back to me. Thank you.
Okay. Carolyn?
Well, first, I'd like to thank our speaker. I thought her talk was excellent, full of insights that one could spend a lot of time thinking about. And I guess I realized as I was listening to you all, it's very difficult to help somebody who you are you're around, you see them a lot, you may think you know them. And so a little remedy, you might make an effort to listen to one of the 10-minute summaries that you find in the news about somebody in a faraway land or doing just having a very difficult situation, and think about them for a few minutes and put them into your thought box, because that might give you some detachment and motivation that will strengthen your efforts to help others.
Thank you. Diana?
I think for me, it's really looking at compassion as action. And Anna, I really loved your talk. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful. And really thinking about how do I show compassion and listening to the depth of who I am. And I keep praying that I'm being guided to know what I'm supposed to do. And when I can't do anything, and for me, that's compassion for the world. And I surrender to God that what I can't handle, that I will be guided into what my part is. And that for me is how I listen for compassion.
Thank you. Bob?
I think when Anna mentioned metta meditation, that's a very beautiful way of sharing, as she said, from the close to the far away. But the wish is, may you be happy, may you have peace and well-being. And that wish is a very powerful way of connecting, I think. And so I'd like to just share that sense of metta meditation of wishing all beings to be happy and have peace of well-being.
Thank you. Is metta another word for friendship, similar to maitri in Sanskrit? Do you know?
Karuna and metta are related, and one means love and one
Means compassion.
yeah, so it's more of a compassion kind of element, yeah, but
Okay.
to love and connection in all ways.
Okay. Thank you. Mary?
Just thinking of the little things. And Mother Teresa, it was Teresa of Avila or Lisieux or Mother Teresa, do all things with love, even the little things.
Thank you. Sure, Renee?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for sharing this idea that compassion is a feeling, but it's also an action. And I think my takeaway is that passion starts with self, but compassion starts with others.
That's very axiomatic. Thank you. Judy, did you want to share something with us?
And she's out.
Yeah. Well, I do want to let you know.
We are missing Renee and Anna. What are you taking away?
Oh, yes, I didn't go back up to Anna. Sorry.
No worries. I just want to thank you all for your listening and attention and also sharing your wisdom. I learned so much. I think also a takeaway that I realized in this conversation is an add-on to the daily ways to practice compassion, and it's a good one is to go outside when you're not in a rush. And I think you'll notice a lot of beautiful things that you'll want to share.
Okay. Mm, I guess I'm just taking away the thrill of imagining being there at this meal that Kai prepared and just being a little butterfly on the wall watching Sharone just reveling in this whole experience. And I bet you I would just be watching her heart glowing and shining. I just loved imagining that scene. Uh, I can tell you that for next week, Anna, we are so grateful that you kept this in your mind and heart as you were doing all that traveling, and that you managed to prepare for us such a lovely and insightful talk with beautiful accompanying graphics to go with it that really enhanced our ability to take in what you were saying. Um, it was an act of compassion on your part to keep us in your heart while you had so much on your plate already. And
Thank you. My pleasure.
yeah. um, our topic for this next week is something I'm in the middle of talking to Deshen and Jade about, and we haven't completed our conversation yet. It's a fascinating topic. Karma and transformation. Karma and transformation. And the quote for the week will be from Miguel de Unamuno. I think he's a Spanish philosopher. We should try to be the parents of our future rather than the offspring of our past. Isn't that a cool quote? I love that quote. The following week is going to be on yoga and will, and we're still seeking a presenter for that one. It was wonderful to have all of you here with us, and we just so warmly thank Anna for getting us started on such a fruitful and I just think really heartrending conversation that we were able to all engage in today. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha. Maybe Deshen and Jade could just stay on for a moment.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Thank you.
My way to